My family invited my wife and me to reconcile, but it turned out to be a setup to pressure me into divorcing for someone they preferred. So I walked out. I'm a 35-year-old man who grew up in a small, tight-knit town where everyone knew everyone else's business. It was the kind of place where people still waved from their front porches, and Sunday potlucks were the highlight of the week. It was a dying town, and I knew that I had to get away from it. I was always interested in photography, but my parents expected me to help my dad and brother out on our farm. Now don't get me wrong, I absolutely love our farm and I grew up with horses, but I always felt like something was missing in my life. Although I was happy with what we had, I was not fully satisfied. My older brother Alan is 3 years older than me, and he was the only one who actually listened to what I had to say. I remember when he went to college, he saved up money from his part-time job to get me my first camera. I was overwhelmed with joy. I took that camera everywhere with me and took pictures of everything I saw. It is still one of my prized possessions. I was a scholar student at school and was part of our football team. So getting into college was easy for me. With my scholarship, I continued to play in college, and this is how I met Elena. She was the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. Her blonde hair, piercing blue eyes, and a smile that could light up the darkest room immediately caught my attention. She was part of the cheerleading squad. So she was there for every game I played. I was a shy person, and so was she. So it took a long time for us to start talking with each other. But when we did, it turned out she shared a similar passion for photography. That common interest became the foundation of our friendship, and eventually our love story. When I asked Elena out on an official date for the first time, she was a bit hesitant, but she said yes. I was over the moon and had never been more excited about anything in my life. I meticulously planned our first date, wanting it to be perfect for this extraordinary woman who had captured my heart. I took Elena to a charming little Italian restaurant nestled in the heart of the city. Soft candlelight illuminated the cozy space, creating a warm and intimate atmosphere. As we sat across from each other, a mixture of nervousness and anticipation filled the air. I couldn't help but be enchanted by her presence, her smile, and the way her eyes sparkled in the flickering candlelight. We shared stories, laughter, and our favorite Italian dishes. The initial hesitation that Elena had felt seemed to evaporate. Every passing moment, I learned about her childhood, her dreams, and the journey that had brought her to the same city where our paths had crossed. It was a night of connection and discovery, and I couldn't have asked for anything more. After dinner, we decided to take a leisurely stroll through a nearby park. While strolling, Elena finally opened up to me about a secret she had kept from everyone. In college, you see, Elena was a single mother. She had a child named Harry, who was just 2 years old. I was surprised to hear that Elena had gotten pregnant because of her then boyfriend Nick. They were together and she thought he would be happy with the news. But unfortunately Nick wasn't, and he decided not to be in the picture. She loved the baby, so she didn't want to give him up regardless of the circumstances. Thankfully her parents supported her decision. Nick's parents agreed to send Elena monthly child support without fail, and she decided never to contact Nick again. Elena told me all of this with tears in her eyes. She continued saying that this was why she hadn't gone out on dates in the last 2 years, and had always kept to herself, which was true. She had decided to open up to me so that I could make a decision on whether or not to pursue her further. After our first date, after knowing everything about her, I could see the vulnerability in her eyes, the weight of a story she had carried alone for so long. At that moment, as Elena hesitated awaiting my reaction, I felt a surge of admiration for the woman before me. Without hesitation, I took her hand, expressing my genuine appreciation for her honesty. I assured her that her past didn't change how I felt about her, and that her strength only deepened my admiration. With those words, I could see a mixture of relief and gratitude wash over Elena's face. She hadn't expected such an understanding response, and the weight she carried seemed to lift. If only a little, that first date became a cherished memory, the beginning of our love story for the years to come. I truly didn't care if she had a child, because I knew that if Elena was this solid and honest of a person, then it meant her child was going to be just as wonderful as her. We kept going out on dates, and eventually after 6 months, she introduced me to her parents. They welcomed me with open arms, displaying the warmth and kindness that Elena herself radiated. It didn't take long for me to feel like a part of their family. We shared stories over homemade dinners, and I could see where Elena got her resilience and genuine kindness. This was also the first time I met Harry, her precious 2-year-old, when Harry toddled into the room, his eyes curious and innocent. My heart melted. Elena introduced us, and from that moment, I knew my life was about to change. I won't lie, but I had always dreamt of becoming a father. When Harry held my hand in his little fingers and looked up at me, I fell in love with him, the same way I had fallen in love with his mother. I couldn't imagine how anybody could have abandoned him, but I knew that if I was going to be in Elena's life, I needed to step up. Elena never asked me to help Harry out, because she had a helping hand at home. But regardless of that, I like spending time with her child. He had the most adorable smile, and spending time with him made me forget all the negative things in my life. Elena and I had a wonderful relationship, and she always encouraged me to follow my passions. I decided to join a photography club in college, which opened new possibilities for me. It was difficult to keep up with the club when I already had classes to attend and my football practice every day. But joining the club was a good decision in the long run, as it helped me meet like-minded people. People who I'm still in touch with today. Once when my parents visited me in college, I seized the opportunity to introduce them to Elena, hopeful that they would see the wonderful person she was. Initially, they seemed to appreciate her company, but it was during a private conversation that I told them and their reaction wasn't great. At first, my parents looked utterly shocked by this revelation. My mom asked if I was dating a single mom in college, and I said yes. My dad couldn't believe it either, and asked if I was being serious right now. I told them firmly that I loved Elena just as much as I loved Harry. And it didn't matter to me if she was a single mother, as she was so much more than that. I wanted to take care of them for the rest of my life. My parents understandably tried to talk me out of it, questioning my choice, but despite their attempts to discourage me, I stood my ground. They eventually gave up, perhaps hoping that this was just a phase, as my mother called it. After I graduated college, I decided to take a chance and join a photography internship. My parents were absolutely against it, and my dad even told me that this sounded too girly for me to pursue. I laughed and tried to explain how taking photographs was what I had always loved. They tried to discourage me, but when I finally secured the internship, there was little they could do to stand in my way. Elena, on the other hand, supported me completely. She believed in me and encouraged me to take this leap of faith. Even my older brother was happy for me. By now he was married and had shifted back to the farm. He had always liked being next to my dad, and it was clear he enjoyed taking care of the land and animals. My parents, especially Dad, held immense pride in my brother. He was the son who followed in his footsteps, taking on the responsibilities of the farm with dedication. They admired his commitment and felt a sense of accomplishment in having a son. Who listened and understood the family legacy. While my parents never resented me, there lingered a hint of disappointment whenever I used to talk to them about my passion for photography. I didn't quite turn out like my brother, and that contrast, though unspoken, was palpable, yet they never held it against me. Instead, they hoped I would find my way and carve my own path. During the photography internship, I found myself immersed in a whirlwind of learning and creativity. The workload was demanding, and late nights were spent perfecting shots and mastering the art of storytelling through my lens. It was a challenging, yet fulfilling period that tested my dedication to photography. As the internship drew to a close, to my surprise and delight, the company offered me a full-time position as their photographer. With this new chapter in my life, I found myself exploring corners of the world I had only dreamed of. The opportunity to travel, the beauty around me was nothing short of incredible. Each new city, culture, and landscape became a canvas for my camera, and I soaked in the wonder of it all. For the first time, I felt a profound sense of happiness and fulfillment that resonated through every aspect of my being. However, this newfound joy came with its own set of challenges. My busy work schedule meant that Elena and I were almost in a long-distance relationship for 3 years despite the physical distance. We made it work. I visited her and Harry whenever I could. She had secured a job as an accountant and was earning quite well also. The separation was tough, but our connection remained steadfast. And this is why I have always loved Elena. She never resented or doubted me, even though I was miles away from her. When I finally secured a high-paying job that allowed me to settle down in one place, I decided that it was time for me to propose to Elena to be my wife. I asked her parents for permission first, as I didn't want to be disrespectful, and I had known them for a long time. By now they were overjoyed with the news, and couldn't wait for me to be a part of their family. When I decided to inform my parents about this, they had a completely opposite reaction. My mother was beside herself in shock and started to go on rant about how immature I was for marrying a single mother like Elena. My dad straight away told me to my face that this was going to be the worst mistake of my life, and that I needed to find a woman with whom I could have a child of my own, instead of taking care of someone else's child. My parents told me how I was going to be stuck with her forever, and that Elena had somehow trapped me into taking care of her son because his own father didn't. Their reactions really hurt me, and I was extremely sad that this was how they thought of my future wife. I firmly stood my ground and explained that over the past 3 years, I had traveled worldwide, working tirelessly to establish myself as a photographer. Throughout this journey, Elena stood by me. She was a strong, independent woman who had a great job, and she had never rushed me into proposing to her. She had also never once asked me to take care of Harry. It was my choice to bond with her child, and now I can't imagine life without them. My parents didn't like my answer and tried to involve my older brother and his wife in this. Surprisingly, my older brother Alan didn't fully support my parents, but he didn't take sides either. He did point out that this was a big burden and responsibility. His wife, however, joined my parents in trying to convince me that there were better options than Elena. She even suggested setting me up with some of her friends. Frustration built up, and I left in anger as they all seemed to gang up on me. It was a tough moment, feeling outnumbered and misunderstood by those I expected to support me. Regardless of their decision, I proposed to Elena, and with joy in her eyes, she said yes. The memory is etched into my brain, and it is still the happiest day of my life. From the very beginning, I told Elena about my family's disapproval. She felt sad about it, but being the kind-hearted person she also understood their perspective. She even went on to tell me that it wasn't too late for me to walk away, given the strain my family's opposition might put on our relationship. I reassured her that my decision was final, and that I would never leave her and Harry until my last breath. Throughout all this, my family continued to call, trying to change my mind. Despite my repeated attempts to make them understand and respect my decision, they felt that Elena was wrong for me. It was a tough time for me, and in one heated moment, my mother even declared that they wouldn't attend our wedding if I went along with this decision. I calmly replied that it was entirely her decision, and that I would understand if they were not present for my happy day. Elena and I eventually chose to get married at the courthouse, knowing my family wouldn't be there, so there was no point in having a big ceremony. Her parents stood by us, offering their support and love. Because we had not wasted our savings on having a big wedding, we could afford to buy a house together. It took a bit of struggle, but we were able to achieve our dreams. Waking up with my wife by my side has been the most wonderful feeling in the world. Harry, now 5 years old, adds so much joy to our lives. He's a bundle of energy, always curious and full of laughter. Being a part of his growth and seeing the family we've built together fills my heart with happiness. Even though our journey had its share of challenges, the love we share as a family makes every struggle worth it. After marrying Elena, I chose to distance myself from my parents to avoid their negativity. My happiness now revolved around Elena. Harry and her parents' work was going smoothly, and everything fell into place just as I had envisioned. However, last week, my brother, who hadn't reached out to me in a while, called. Seeing his name on my phone surprised me, and part of me hesitated to answer, but I thought it could be an emergency. So I took the call. He started saying how much he missed me, and apologized for not calling me sooner. I was a bit taken aback, as my brother seldom expressed his emotions, and I asked him if everything was okay. My brother then told me how my parents wanted to invite me and Elena to the farm, in an attempt to mend things with us. I was surprised to hear that, as I never thought this day would come. My brother asked if it was okay for my mother to speak with me, and passed the call to her. My mother's voice, on the other end, carried a mix of uncertainty and a hint of desperation. She spoke about wanting to mend our strained relationship, and expressed how everyone in the family wanted to see me at the family farm. As she continued talking, I couldn't help but feel a sense of skepticism. I questioned whether this was a genuine attempt to reconcile with us. Another episode in the ongoing family drama. My mother, in turn, insisted that they were genuinely apologetic and were seeking a chance to rebuild our connections. Caught in a whirlwind of emotions, I hesitated. The wounds from the past were still fresh, and the idea of revisiting my family was daunting. Yet a part of me longed for resolution, for a chance to heal the fractures that had formed over the past months. With a deep breath, I thanked my mother for reaching out, and promised her that Elena and I would be there. That weekend, we left Harry under the care of Elena's parents, so we could fly down to my hometown. Arriving at the farm, I was warmly greeted by my parents, who also welcomed Elena with open arms. My brother and his wife came up to hug us. It felt wonderful to see my family after so long, but as I turned my head to the living room, confusion washed over me. As we were met with a gathering of familiar faces and close friends, I looked at my parents, confused. and they informed me that they had decided to invite friends and family to give me a proper welcome back home. I nodded and walked in to greet everyone. My mother, wearing a sly smile, pulled me aside and introduced me to a woman named Gigi. I was taken aback, not understanding why she was introducing me at what was supposed to be a family gathering. My mother then went on to say how Gigi was her high school best friend's and she daughter had recently gone through a divorce. I nodded awkwardly, not knowing how to react. My mother then continued, saying how she thought Gigi and I would make a great couple. My confusion turned into disbelief. She started talking about how we would look so good together and should probably exchange numbers. As I looked at my mother incredulously, it suddenly dawned on me that this gathering wasn't just about mending things. My parents had an agenda, and it involved Gigi becoming a part of my life. I asked my mother why she was talking like this when she knew that I was married. My dad, who had perhaps overheard the conversation, told me that he needed to speak to me privately. Reluctantly, I agreed and followed them to a room, leaving Elena alone to navigate the awkward glances of curious guests. Behind closed doors, my parents wasted no time in revealing their true intentions. Mark, we've arranged this meeting because we believe it's time for you to reconsider your marriage, my father declared with an air of authority. Stunned, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They explained their reasoning, insisting that Gigi, with her familiar background, would be a better match for me, someone they could approve of, and who didn't already have a child with another man. But I love Elena, we're married, and we're building a life together. What made you even think it would be a good idea to introduce me to Gigi? I protested, struggling to make sense of the surreal situation. My mother, unmoved, insisted they were only looking out for my happiness and that I would thank them one day for helping me escape my current situation. My dad told me that Gigi was divorced, so she wouldn't mind getting married to me if I could quickly get a divorce from Elena. I stared at my parents for a second, then I started laughing at the sheer absurdity of the situation. This seemed like something out of a soap opera, but I couldn't believe it was happening to me in real life. My parents had invited me under the pretense of mending things, so they could convince me to divorce the love of my life and marry someone else simply because they hated my choice. They seriously believed that I would somehow be convinced. My dad, probably feeling defensive, tried justifying their actions by saying they had discussed it with my brother and his wife. According to him, everyone thought I had made a huge mistake marrying Elena. That statement pushed me over the edge. Despite usually keeping my cool, I couldn't contain my anger. I've always respected my parents deeply, but this was too much. I raised my voice, expressing how embarrassing and hurtful their attempts to make me leave my wife and child were. I made it clear that I was done, holding on to hope that they would change. It was a breaking point. As I walked into the backyard, I found Elena talking to some of my relatives. In a hushed tone, I whispered to her that we needed to leave immediately. She looked shocked, but my expression made her trust me. Without questioning anything further, my brother and his wife insisted that we stay, but I didn't even acknowledge them. I was so angry at my brother, knowing he had been aware of this plan all along and had allowed it to happen. I didn't want to create a scene, so I quietly rescheduled our flight tickets and we left. During the flight, I filled Elena in on the conversation with my parents. She was just as shocked and a bit at how they had tried to pressure me into divorcing her. Since that weekend, I've been bombarded with calls and messages from my parents and my brother. He thinks I shouldn't have shouted at my parents and that I should be a better son, saying they know me best and that I should at least listen to them. So am I the a-hole for fighting with my parents, for trying to convince me to leave my wife and our child just because they don't approve of our marriage? Update 1. Thank you everyone for all your support for us at this tough time. I guess everyone pretty much agrees that what my parents did was completely out of line. The only reason I was feeling guilty about my decision to yell at them, because being the youngest, I have never really stood up to my parents this way. I knew that they didn't like my wife and I was okay with it. But to go so far as to try to convince me another woman was absolutely despicable. What really surprised me the most was that my brother was in on this. We were close growing up, and he has always supported my passion. But I never expected him to stand against my decision to marry Elena. I think more than my parents, it hurts me more that my brother betrayed me. He could have easily given me a heads up, so I could have avoided all this. Yet he chose to stay silent. I'm planning on calling my brother tomorrow, after I have calmed down from this whole situation. Update 2. As promised, I'm back with an update. I texted my brother Alan to give me a call whenever he was free, as I knew he stayed busy at the farm the whole day. He called me during the evening, and I confronted him about what had happened between our parents. I straight up asked him if it was true that he had known about this all along. To my disappointment, Alan told me that he indeed knew about it, and he thought Gigi was a wonderful woman who could make me happy if I gave her the chance. I told him how wrong the entire family was to treat me and Elena this way when we had done nothing to warrant such hate. Alan then told me that everyone loved me and wanted me to be happy. So I asked Alan what made him specifically think that I wasn't happy with Elena. He took a moment to think, and then told me that I needed to realize the fact that Harry was never going to be my son. He believed I needed to divorce Elena so I could marry Gigi, and hopefully start a family that could carry our family legacy and keep our traditions alive. I couldn't believe what I was hearing from my brother. It was clear that my brother had become influenced by what my parents wanted, and as their dutiful son, he only wanted to do things that they approved of. Hence, when I didn't listen to my family and married someone they hated, my brother didn't understand me. We argued back and forth some more, and it became clear that he was not going to support my marriage. He suggested that maybe I should consider their perspective and think about the consequences of my actions, as this would seriously affect our family. Feeling betrayed and hurt, I ended the call. I won't lie. I cried a bit after my call with my older brother. I had never imagined that a day would come when my own brother would treat my wife so despicably. I knew that if my family, including my brother, thought this way about my marriage, there was no way they would ever change their minds. I did not want to ever subject Elena and Harry to this toxic drama. I have never regretted marrying her. Hence, I needed to let go of people who didn't want to be a part of our life. I want Harry to grow up around people who genuinely love and support him. Update 3. Thanks to everyone for your continued feedback on my post. This post seems to have gone viral, and I'm getting multiple requests from strangers for an update. Here it goes. It's been 5 months now since my last update, and my life has been a bit more peaceful. Ever since my last argument with my family, I've been wanting to adopt Harry legally so that no one can ever question me on whether or not he is my son. Last week, I finally had a conversation with my wife and her parents regarding this. It was heartwarming to see the smiles on their faces as they supported my decision. Harry's biological father, Nick, has never been present, and while Nick's parents provide monthly child support, they have remained uninvolved in Harry's life since his birth. The legal process might be a challenging journey, but I have been with Harry and watched him grow up for so many years that I can't wait for the day when he can be legally recognized as my son. Now coming onto my parents, they never apologized to me since the incident. They never once acknowledged how disappointing their actions were in trying to break my marriage. After my last talk with my brother, I texted my parents in the family group chat, expressing that I couldn't handle their negativity and drama anymore. I wished them well for the future and made it clear that they shouldn't reach out. In response, my mother sent a threatening message, saying if I didn't do what they wanted, they would ensure I wasn't included in their will. I didn't bother replying back to her because, in all honesty, I don't really care. I hope they leave everything behind for my brother and his family, as I'm quite happy with what I have. Meanwhile, my wife and I have been doing great these past few months. Initially, Elena was very hurt by what my parents did on that day, but over time she has let it go. She is the sort of kind-hearted person who believes we should always focus on the positive things, which I wholeheartedly agree with. Every morning, I wake up feeling joyous watching her lay next to me. Her peaceful face a reminder of the love we share. We have always found strength in one another, no matter what challenges life throws our way, and will continue to do so in the future. I hope this will be my last update regarding this incident, as I want to close this chapter forever and focus on my life ahead.